Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Way of God's Remembrance with Michael Hayes. This is presented by Awake to Love. I'm Lee here with Cindy. We are the volunteer Zoom hosts and so grateful that you are here. As a way of introduction, I will read Michael's words to bring clarity to the focus and format of this gathering. This is a weekly gathering for those seeking greater awareness of their true nature. There are many paths and approaches to higher consciousness and to greater awakening to who we truly are. The essence, the truth of all these paths is more about remembering who we are and have always been, rather than becoming something different or more than we have seen ourselves to be. A way of God's remembrance goes to the heart, to the intention of all the paths. This is what we will explore together each week. Michael will share thoughts and awarenesses that come forward as relevant and purposeful for our time together, followed by questions and answers related to what he shares about. We will begin with an invocation of light to help us all to be in collective alignment. Ron Hulnick is standing by, ready to share of the loving and lead us in the light invocation. After the light invocation, we will play a recording to lead us in Anai Hugh chanting. Okay, Ron, that should be a good ask to unmute.
I think I'm unmuted.
You are on.
All right. Well, Lord God of all creation, we ask just now that we all be present in the light of love that is always present, that is always available, and that is in fact our living breath. It has no dependence, for it is always present. And through this realization, we are so grateful for this opportunity to participate in this program with Michael. And we say, thank you, Lord. So be it.
Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to be with you. Hmm. I'm in a very quiet place inside, and perhaps you are feeling quieter inside yourself as we come together here. I do look forward to the peace that comes forward when this consciousness of spirit that lives us all and moves us all and is ever present and ever available to us makes itself known in us, makes itself known as us, and opens us to receive of its presence. At times like this, it's hard for me to talk about anything because everything seems to be really beyond explaining, beyond describing, beyond knowing in the normal way we think of knowing. I remember my teacher, John Roger, had a talk he did, and it was entitled The Known, the Unknown, and the Unknowable. And it was from a long time ago. And I remember at the time being very perplexed by that idea of known, unknown, and unknowable. And I always pondered, well, what would be unknowable? And this idea that there is reality that is unknowable. When I contemplate that, I reflect on where my meditation has taken me this evening. And there's this knowing or recognition in me that reality is known by differentiation. The differentiations in reality, the differentiations of time and space, but beyond that, differentiations between different planes of reality, different planes of spirit, differentiations between all that is manifest and then that is never manifest, that is always just pure potential to be. And that there is God, if we want to call it that, that is beyond all the differentiation and is always just itself, and all the appearances of differentiation are simply just appearances, but not in fact truth. Now, for us as individuals, we come to the realization of that the differentiation between you, me and you, between you and each other, between um, physical and non-physical, the manifest and the unmanifest, all these differentiations seem truth and seem essential to us because without these, how could we have a relationship? How could we connect? How could we communicate? How could we understand? How could we live in time and space and have our stories in time and space? But there is this that is God that is never differentiated. And even to talk about it seems funny because what's the point? Because it is just what it is. But it is the truth of everything. And we could talk about it as our source, but we'd even be lying in that because it is the source of all. But more than that. So I'm in a funny place with this. I remember my teacher, John Roger, telling me in the spirit, not physically, but in the spirit, that there was a place in spirit that I would live and operate from, and that I could go higher than that or go beyond that. But I couldn't stay beyond it. Now, I will confess to you that I have gone beyond it and I have tried to stay beyond it. And he was right, pretty much as to be expected. Being beyond it was more than my consciousness could handle in terms of coming back into physicality and dealing with all this. But I did enjoy being beyond it all. And not really by intention, but just by going into meditation tonight, I kind of dipped into the beyond it all place. And so I'm not sure if anything I'm saying tonight is coherent, but I'm inviting each of you to recognize that you too exist in oneness with all that is. And in that oneness, there is only love. And there is only this uniting truth, which is that love is all there is, and it sustains all the differentiations and all the formulations we deal with and we look at and we experience and that we express. And it is always beyond all those differentiations. But it lives and loves through all the differentiations. And we are but another differentiation in the way we deal with this body and deal in time and space. But this, that is the undifferentiated truth, is entirely present and entirely available. It lives you, breathes you, learns through you, and frees you from all the confining experiences and expressions that it allows to be present with yours and mine attempt to have realness, to attempt to have truth as individuals. It's always this truth that's allowing it all, never bound or binding, meaning it never is bound by any of what it allows. And it doesn't bind that which it allows. It gives total freedom to it, which is something that I hadn't understood till tonight. It has no investment in the outcome. Of our travails, of our journeys, of our trials and tribulations, of our intention to achieve, to become. It is just the fishbowl we're all swimming in. And the water and the salt and the fish. Thank you for listening. It's probably been one of the least understandable things I've ever talked about. I'm very, very grateful to be with you all tonight, to share with you. Bless you all. I'm going to turn it over to Lee, who's going to share some information with you, and then we'll do some questions, and then we'll see if there's any answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Bless you, Michael. A reminder for me and us all, consistently before noon, thanks to our amazing volunteer, the archives of our gatherings are online, available to us all, to anyone you'd like to share it with. So for you, Michael, for me, for any of us who choose, we can go back and see if there's even more to be understood or not in the opening sharing. I am going to ground in order to share guidelines for questions. Questions are to be about a way of God's remembrance and what Michael has shared. To ask a question, please raise your Zoom hand. You can find that by hovering near the bottom of your Zoom window. Click on the React button. A pop-up appears. Choose Raise Hand. Please also turn on your video for full participation. If you are on a low bandwidth connection and are unable to, so be it. Most important, and since so many of us have had the blessing of working with Michael over so many years for assistance in clearing so many things, this is not that. Please do not ask questions of a personal nature and do not ask Michael for assistance in clearing. Questions are to be for your benefit, the benefit of those of us gathered, and those who will participate via the archives. We ask that you look to the integrity of your intentions before asking a question of Michael. And thank you for your cooperation. Finally, here is the legal consent. By raising your hand and asking questions of Michael, you are giving full consent to Awake to Love to make the audio and video of this gathering, including your sharing, available as online archives for anyone to access. Please do not raise your hand and do not share unless you are in full agreement. Thank you.
Hmm. Am I on?
You are on. You are seeing clearly no hands at this moment.
Uh,
Linda has just raised her hand.
Hello, Linda.
Hi, Michael, and thank you so much for that. It really doesn't bother me if I understand what you're saying. I just want to experience it. And as you were talking, I'm not at all surprised to see no hands raised, not at all. Because clearly we sent me sailing anyway. I'll just speak for myself. So is there any more you would like to say about that? If there is any more to say, or whatever spirit would have you say. I'd be grateful to hear it.
Hmm. Ah, I don't know what more one could say about that. One could say so much. But I know that, as John Roger would often say, when in the higher place, you always can end up lying if you try and explain it or define it or convey it. But I'm not doing any of that. I'm just being it. Ah. Hmm. There were several times where John Roger prevailed upon me to write a book about my work. Um, The last time was in Madrid, Spain. I remember that. And it isn't that I haven't tried. I've done so many classes and shared so much. I could probably fill up a number of books. And I have people like my friend Lee. We're still working to sort of some way, somehow put it together. And the biggest problem I keep having is I keep coming awake to what is. It's even what I just said is a lie because I'm not coming awake. It's just awakening itself more to itself. But even as that happens, so many things that I might put into a book about clearing, about healing, about how consciousness works. The importance of all of it just seems to just dissolve and disappear. As I keep coming more and more into the totality of what this is. And yet, for whatever purpose of God, I've been, see, I'm going to lie to you now, but I've been able somehow. But this has been granted to this consciousness to know and experience this, to be this. And also hold physical form and continue to play this game of individuation. While being so beyond individuation in this consciousness that's present, that's always present, that is only present, that is that is always only present. That is never apart from any aspect of the creation, but always beyond every part of the creation. That is together with all of it, and that encompasses all of it, and infuses itself through all of it. And is both all of it and none of it. How can this be defined and explained and put into a book? It is the book that God is creating and writing, the book of itself. But what is a book but a compilation of story, of perspective, of realization, of understanding. Hmm. I remember John Roger once sharing that when Sai Baba was asked what his message was, and he said, "My life is my message." I can't see how my life is a message, or perhaps my life is my message, but not God's message. And God's message is every message. God's message is all it is. And all that is God's message. I've told people, I think in one of these sharings, of a opportunity to merge back into God that was there for me and that I declined it, expressing the intention that I didn't want there to be anything in all creation, all reality that could make me forget God. God agreed or assented to it and threw me back into creation and back into individuation. It's like I'm looking at all that as part of this coming to this remembrance. And it is so interesting because in this remembrance, there's no me to celebrate it or to claim it. Yet paradoxically, I can still connect enough to the identification of this form to talk and to relate stories about the history, the adventures of the consciousness that experienced and expressed in and through this form. So, uh, which leads me to just share that God is entirely conscious, living in each of us as us, experiencing us as we experience us as singular and as distinct, and simultaneously apart from all this in a totalness of an of inclusion of all of it without being part of any of it. What a glorious thing. God can do this. And we are all part of God doing this. So I don't know if this is helping you understand this more. I don't think it's to be understood. I think it's to be experienced. The funny thing is, I know in this, Steve, so say I know, there's no I to know it, but it's known in this unknowable truth that every consciousness participating on this call or that will listen to this call is always in this same truth. And there will be a remembrance to every consciousness of this truth. And that remembrance will bring alive in every consciousness this knowing. So many times in my process coming into the remembrance, I experienced so much resistance within my individuated nature, struggling to maintain itself, its story, terrified of obliteration, that it would be obliterated and be no more if it cooperated or allowed what was transpiring. And so it fought this undoing process of spirit. It moved against it in every way it could. And in each phase of this, the truth of spirit came through. And that individual story was undone, almost like a knot. There was a ball of thread, maybe there was the true Gordian knot, and it was just unwinding. And yet to come to this knowing and realize there was nothing lost, nothing could ever be lost from God, for God. And all the storylines and all the games of life, even all the games of death through so many forms, none of it's been lost. Mm. But none of it has changed, the one that is. Mm. Bless you, Linda. Maybe this won't be a night of questions. You can get one of these calls or gatherings, shared a little saying or poem that it came to me when I was, um, I believe 19, probably 19. And then there was a line that said, asking not to answer all, so can be tasted the sweet fullness of existence. So we'll talk with Eden now. Eden, how may we support you?
Thank you, Michael. Um, what's been what I've been wondering about. So I don't generally see things and I don't often bring back any information when I'm doing SEs. And how do I know that I'm waking up?
Hmm. That's a really good question. See, in a way, it's like a paradoxical thing because to know that you are waking up is to know that you're not you, and to know reality beyond the time space individual self. And see, the awakening is really you wake up beyond yourself. So the self doesn't really wake up. You awaken past the illusion of self. And when you're really beyond that illusion of self, you will know reality as it's known beyond self. And as that becomes conscious for you, you, well, will you know? You'll know that you're love, and you know that God is love, and you know that love is all there is. Great fiction, great storyline of our individuation and our path of becoming, our path of changing and transforming. Is something that we will play in, and we will have the appearance of progression, the appearance of evolving, the appearance of coming more aware, coming more awake. And that will work in our consciousness to a certain point. And then there comes a point where the whole process of that becoming just starts to crumble. But we don't make it crumble by all that we attain and achieve, like somebody likes like building our way up. What really happens, it's more like we try so much, everything we can conceive or think of, or we try and try and try and try. And eventually it hits the truth of it. Truth of it comes to us. That there's nothing I can do. And it starts to fall apart. We start to literally die to this process. It just starts to crumble. Just let's go. And as it all lets go, the truth of what is, it's there. Kind of like that old, was the golden Buddha thing, and they hid the golden Buddha under a old statue, and then one day they dropped the statue in the crack. They opened it up, and there was the golden Buddha. Well, that's the reality. It's getting beyond the self. Is when you know, and when you know from beyond the self that You are now awake. You are remembering. Fundamental awakening is to awakening from the illusion of individuation, the illusion of self, the illusion of time and space, the illusion of singularity.
It's like what you just shared struck a frequency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so,
Yeah. What you experiencing is the whole purpose of a way of God's remembrance. That it is that there are those who can know this.
well, it's almost like there's no doing it, it's, and I
There
know you
is
talked about this a lot, but it's just the being.
some ways we kind of go through that whole process of doing it almost to see if we can do it.
Right.
And in some ways you could almost look at God allowing this whole journey of form and doing to finally come to a point where there's just this knowing that it doesn't work. And something finally relents and lets go. Oh. And then the truth is right there. It's so strange for me to watch all this because I'm talking to you and it's like in like high speed through my life, showing me different stages of where that happened.
Mm. And right now I'm feeling it all through my body.
Well, those would be ways that you will reference it and try to own it and claim it and define it, because that's an inevitable part of us working in form that we will do that.
Right. Right.
But it's beyond all that. But there's no problem with all that. That is more than accepted. That is expected.
Mm.
But this knowing is available.
Mm.
And God is awakening all of itself to itself. How God does that, when God does that, is God's business.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless you, Michael.
Bless you. Tim Thompson.
There we go. Can you hear me okay, Michael?
I can, Tim.
Okay. Um, I'm hoping you can help with this. I have experienced many times kind of an undescribable, I don't know what how to describe it. It's um, I don't relate to it as a sound current because I've heard that and other times not. But it's something that seems to be just present always.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to have some kind of a resonance or vibration with it. I call it a sound, but no sound I can describe to you.
Mm-hmm.
The way I've been relating to it so far, and I may be completely wrong, but is in the Bible in Genesis, when they talk about, God spoke the word and the word became.
Right.
It seems to be something along that line,
Mm-hmm.
like
Well, yeah.
or a continuation of that creation.
Mm.
Can you talk about that, or have any? Do you know what I'm
Sure.
talking about?
Yeah, I do. So if we were talking about the biblical thing, there was darkness on the face of the deep, and God spoke, let there be light. We could say, well, the deep could be like the etheric and the unconscious, and then there was nothing in time and space. Then it all came to be.
Yeah.
Um, see, we would describe it as a sound current because a way to have a consciousness of this or perception of this is through the auditory process.
Yeah.
So like hearing sound. But if you move up into, see again, as I start to say this, I know this isn't true because there's no up. Let's say you, as consciousness, you make experiences in a movement of, we'll just use the words that we relate to, let's say a movement of transcendence and or elevation of being or consciousness. And as that goes on, you could traverse, let's say, different levels, realms, or dimensions. Let's call them, and let's say if we went above those, above the soul plane, we might call them different differentiations of God, differentiations of spirit. But see, if you moved up in those differentiation far enough, there would be a point beyond sound. There would be no sound. And yet there's God in that, and there are even forces that serve God in and through all that. The ones we know of, we label as the silent ones,
Right.
because the reality that they exist in, the presence of God in that condition makes no sound. And that would be related to as a sound. And that same place would be where the traveler consciousness sources out. And ultimately, everything sources out of that, which means all of us source out of that too.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is don't let anything obstruct you from the truth of your experience. If it doesn't quite come the way you might think it should based upon an explanation, either from another person or a book. I mean, John Roger talked many times about how he was lying to us, but he was saying just maybe it's close enough that it helps you connect to it.
Right.
So that experience of beingness it's just truth. And it's always so. It's always so.
Right.
And if you think about it, and the mystical traveler story, and I just call it mystical traveler, but let's say of all these masters who act as anchors for this transcendent truth of God, that by having or participating, let's say, in some form of concentration of it, if we just think of it the traveler is this intention of God, and that intention would be have a greater concentration in this particular part of the illusion of time and space that would allow a bridging effect of more access into this that is, we're just calling it the traveler now. But all those people and all those lists, when they do the traveler through the ages classes, none of those they weren't all describe themselves as the traveler or mystical traveler or anything else. They weren't all talking about sound currents. They weren't all, but they knew something, and they gave over to something that is an eternal truth. And that eternal truth lived through them and moved through them and activated in consciousness a greater remembrance of its presence and its aliveness in the people that were moved by it. We still can listen to Rumi's poems, even though they're translated from a different language and are very different in the translation. Somehow we still go, whoa, because it creates an activation. And the great art told my story of, being over in Europe and watching the art. And I have my dog there. Oh, yes. Now I have both my dogs here. Usually they're so content. And it's like, it is a living spirit that is always with us, but it makes itself available to itself, even though it's done this amazing game for itself or prosper itself, it's gotten itself to participate in this time-space game in such a way that it seems to be a great forgetting of itself. And yet it reaches in and activates and leaves like breadcrumbs. I think I told this story about walking into the art museum and all these drawings and being inextricably drawn across the room. There's just walls and they're just like charcoal drawings or pencil drawings, not pencils because they're old, and just one I had was drawn to it. And I looked at it and it said Michelangelo Buonarroti. Those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. But when it's about the spirit, it's not these eyes and these ears. It's referencing something that's true about us, that hears the call, answers the call, and then conveys the call.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Bless you. I don't know if we have time. I'm totally lost on time, but I don't even know. I don't even have my clock here.
We are at our completion time, Michael. It's 7:34 now.
Oh my goodness. How did that happen? I could just sit here with you guys all night, to be honest. You guys probably be bored, but I'm going to take Barbara Fiametta. I want to see if Barbara can ask a non-personal question. I don't think she ever has with me, but I'm going to give her a chance to do it.
Michael, it is about you, not me. Yeah, this is the second time, Michael, that you've mentioned that you had an opportunity to leave. I don't know if that's the way to say it. I've got buttons here. Am I okay? Okay.
I can, I
Okay.
don't have to see you. I can hear you. It's fine.
Okay. So my question is, if you were able to accomplish, God taking you home, wouldn't that imply that you already have cleaned up everything between you and God?
Well, at the time I hadn't, because what was between me and God is I was letting things come between me and God because I would forget that God was in those things.
Oh,
And so I wasn't complete according to let's say, the desire, if we want to use that word, that was present in my consciousness in this place. Now, this was me in a metaphysical reality. But when I came to it, it was so clear. This is, see, there is no coming home to God in the true case, because we've never left home. We're always with God. There's nowhere else we could ever be, but we enter into an experience there with, and let's say there's an extension of a soulic essence into form and time and space. And we just, and because there's a learning process that is of interest to God. God creates this reality, then injects itself into the reality to explore what it's created, to know and understand it. This is what's going on. And we tend to still perceiving the process from the human idea of escaping the suffering of form, the suffering of limitation. And we get to a place, having lived and existed, or experience ourselves as living, existing in form long enough, it starts to fall apart for us. That nothing, partly because we've done it all. We've done it all so much that it's like there's nothing new for us in it. And so it's like we're not learning anymore. And so there's like a movement of consciousness that calls us back into that remembrance. Now, you could, as a soul initiate, you could get the soul initiation, and then you could die physically and have finished enough of the karma, or which is another way. See, karma is what attracts. So when you say, well, you worked out your karma, you're really just saying, I've let go of my attraction. And another way of saying is I've let go of my attachment. Because through the attraction, we create attachment. And so what we're really saying is you could have let go of attachment enough to, let's say, the storyline that you created and been involved in the physical world, but let's say also in the astral plane and the causal plane and the mental plane and the etheric plane, enough that you could then come back into remembrance of yourself as a soul, and then be done with, and have that sufficiently that you could be complete with your involvement with time and space. So you can do all of that. And that might be for you or for your soul, that might be enough at this time for your soul. We don't know, because your soul is not experienced all the suffering of this. The soul doesn't suffer, it watches it. We experience it in our separation and our ego, and we experience the suffering, and we feel it, and we experience through our senses, and so we have suffering. But the soul's not suffering. It's learning and observing. However, the thing I was talking about was something different than that. I was talking not about just going back in the prize I was after was something more. I've talked about it and I've said that we can get into the soul realm and you can have greater completion with the experience of time and space, but also since you have the advantage of participating in time and space, it kind of supports you to also come awake and come aware into dimensions of God, these differentiations of the higher planes of spirit, while you're still holding on to this physical experience. There's advantages to us by holding on to this physicality, because it gives a particular kind of engagement into all parts of God. But if we give up the physicality, it's like we can have a knowing of it as God, but we don't have a knowing of it as a singularity. I know this sounds like double talk. What I'm saying is, and so there's advantage to all that. And if we think about it, there were many people in MSA participated and went through the initiations, they got up and they got that soul initiation. And in a sense, that soul initiation was you had a level of remembrance that you were more than your body and more than your imagination, more than your thoughts, and even more than your ego, more than your I. And you were in fact a consciousness that existed beyond all that. But I also references, but many people did that, and then they're still around, many years later. So, if you look around MSA, there's people who've been, quote, the soul initiation, they got it maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So why are they still here? Because there's an opportunity to go higher. And John Roger talked about that he would work with souls that asked, and that if it was clear, he would work with them to go above soul, to go farther into God. So it's an immense opportunity. So for me, it was not about my goal wasn't soul. My goal was to go into the totalness of God and to be that. And I stopped the process because I was not yet able to be in that totalness of God. Dealing in the dimension of time and space was still pulling me into forgetfulness and distraction. And so I wanted to be able to exist in the land of distraction and simultaneously know the totalness, the oneness, or to be in that level of remembrance. That was it's a lie to say it was mine. It was the intention that was expressed there. Let's say it was the intention of the beingness of me. So for each consciousness, that will be determined according to the destiny line given to each consciousness by God. Now you framed it in a way that works for you. Like, this is a path, you're doing this path and it's going to take you home. And I go, I think you can keep working with that because it works for you. Except for me, it came to a place where I moved beyond the search for being home, because I realized I was always home, but I also realized I'd never left home because I was always with God. So it wasn't about coming to a new place. It was about being able to be in the remembrance of the truth, even when I was entering not in the right way, even when I was experiencing all these distortions and all these distractions that were pushing on the conscious and pulling on the conscience to be in forgetfulness.
Okay. Michael, the reason I asked is because I want what you want. I want to be where you are.
You
Internally.
are. So what you are there, but it's the fact that you don't know that you are is the problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm sharing this with you and others because it's possible to know this. And so I'm sharing it to support others to come into this we call the remembrance. And it is inevitable that every consciousness will be in remembrance.
Okay.
Because, but if we're not there yet, we will.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Bless you, Barbara. And thank you for asking a non-personal question. You impressed me. All right. I think we've done enough. You guys are probably, I don't know what you guys are. I'm just loving you and grateful that I could share this with you. Sharing this with you and sharing this with the world is sort of the one purpose I still relate to. Dearest Lord, thank you for blessing us with your company and blessing us to come into remembrance, blessing us to know that we are always in remembrance and helping us to shed the skin like the snake does. We are born again into this truth, our togetherness with you, with one another, with everything. Thank you for blessing each one here. I ask that through the week ahead, that each consciousness that is participating with this may be blessed to have a greater experience of the living God, of the living love that is the source and the substance of all existence. This is my request and prayer. Yet nevertheless, thy will is done. And God bless us all. Amen. Very special.